I'm Tom Hailey, and this is Bluegrass Region Voices and Views. This is my final 2022 episode, and I'm hoping that it is not going to end up being a ramblecast because this one is an unscripted solo show. Oh my. Usually I have a guest. I just always have a guest, and it's about my guest and not about me. But I didn't want to take anyone's time away from their family and office parties and those types of things here at the end of 2022, and didn't want to take the time myself either to sit down and do in-depth podcast conversations. So I decided to end the year with asking what are some questions that people have about my podcast, or maybe even podcasting in general. I get a lot of questions throughout the year. So here I'm going to just take about 15, 20 minutes at the most, I'm thinking, and just answer a few of the questions that I get and see how that goes with a solo show. So what's Bluegrass Region Voices and Views about? Well, my original concept for it when I started thinking about it in 2019 and then launched it in early 2020, right before the pandemic hit, the overarching theme was it was going to be about interesting people, places, and activities around the bluegrass region of Kentucky. So there was going to be more to it than the podcast. There was going to be a blog and video and photography and soundscapes and so on, featuring people and highlighting different activities around this bluegrass region. But then things really slowed down, of course, in 2020, and I had to pivot from doing the in-person podcast to just doing, not just, but to doing remote podcast over the computer with, technology instead of face-to-face. And I dropped the idea of doing photography and videos and so on until we figured out what was going on. So now I'm coming back in 2023 and going to be adding photography and video and some YouTube things and so on to the Bluegrass Region Voices and Views website. But for 2022 and 2023 for my podcast, I'm focusing on having in-depth conversations with creative and inspiring people around the bluegrass region of Kentucky. So it is going to be about interesting people, places, and activities around the bluegrass, with a focus for the podcast on creative and inspiring people. And you can go to my website at bluegrassregionvoicesandviews.com to follow what I'll be doing with all the different aspects of the project. Another question is, how do you find guests for your podcast? Well, I have a pretty healthy, deep network of friends. I'm over 70 years old. I've lived in Lexington since 1967, except for 4 years when I lived in Pittsburgh in the year from 81 to 85. So been involved with a lot of organizations. A couple of them really worth mentioning are Toastmasters, and the other is the Kentucky branch of the National Speakers Association. And through those two organizations, I've met a lot of really creative and inspiring people. And then I've been a member of other clubs and organizations and associations over the years. So through the magic of social media, and for me, that's mostly LinkedIn and Facebook. I post things to Twitter from time to time, but I don't get on Twitter maybe once or twice a month. But through the magic of Facebook and LinkedIn, I've been able to keep in touch with people, and there's just an endless number of creative and inspiring people that I know. And then another thing that happens is that when you interview someone, at the end of the interview, you can ask them if they know someone that they would like to hear on the podcast. So, one connection leads to another, and that's really a powerful way to build any network. Another question is, how do you determine the length of your podcast? Well, again, these are interview podcasts, and I like to go into some depth. I don't want it to be just a surface conversation, but I want us to get into a little bit of depth and really make it inspiring. So they're typically just about always over an hour, but the maximum length that I want them to be is 1 hour, 19 minutes, and 59 seconds. Now, some of you that are dinosaurs like me might know why that is. The reason for that is that that's the longest file size in time that you can burn to a CD, is just a second under 1 hour and 20 minutes, as I understand it. And there are people who I have interviewed who want a CD of the conversation or multiple CDs that they can share with friends and family of theirs who don't listen to podcasts. And they also want to put the CD in their legacy box, or whatever you would call it, where your generations later people can find something with your voice on it. So typically over an hour, but I really work to keep it under 1 hour, 19 minutes, and 59 seconds. Another question, where do you record your podcasts? Well, I'm really fortunate to have a studio in my home. I have a home that was built in 1957, and back when they still did basements, and we have a full basement, and I have a large portion of that basement is dedicated to my Bluegrass Region Voices and Views project. I have had people here who have said it looks like a radio station. So, and I'll come back around in a moment to some of the equipment that I have, but I'm really fortunate to have this space in my basement to have a home studio. Now, when I'm doing so people I interview come to my home and we record it here. But if we need to record it for some reason over technology, over a computer, like sometimes I've interviewed people in Louisville who couldn't come here, and I didn't want to go there at that time, so we would do it over technology called Squadcast. Now, eventually, I'll probably be pivoting to using a program called Libsyn Connect. Now, I host my podcast on a site called Libsyn, which stands for Liberated Syndication, one of the first podcast hosting services that began in like 2004 or so. So with Libsyn Connect, they've got that in the beta stage now, but that's going to be rolling out, and that's supposed to make it really easy over your computer to interview people and record the conversation. So another question is, how long do you think you'll be doing podcasts? Well, I believe I can do this, into my late years, even from an assisted living facility. I think it'd be interesting to talk with the older folks who were residents with me and help them tell their story. So I don't know why there is a reason to ever stop podcasting as long as I'm physically and mentally able to do it. Another question is, what podcasts do I listen to? Well, I could talk for 20 minutes about that, but I'm just going to mention two that I never miss. One that is locally produced, and that is Hope is Here by Greg Horn. And I listen to Hope is Here. Just search for Hope is Here with your podcast app. It's just right under 15 minutes in length, and it comes out Monday through Friday, and I listen to Hope is Here every morning during the week while I am preparing breakfast. Hope is Here with Greg Horn. And then another that I never miss is The Feed, F-E-E-D, which is the official podcast of Libsyn, which is my hosting service for my sound files. And The Feed comes out every 2 weeks. It's a little bit over an hour in length usually, and I never miss that. So Hope is Here and the feed. If you are a podcaster, you really need to be listening to the feed. Another question I get is, do you make money podcasting? No, I do not make money podcasting. It is a hobby. The way I look at it is there are two aspects to it. One is to have fun with friends, which I certainly do. And the other is as a way to stay out of my recliner. Having retired in 2019 and having the time on my hands, I need something to do other than just sit around in my recliner staring out the window. And podcasting is a great thing for me to do to meet that objective. Also, I spend money on the podcast, but it is a hobby. And I am, if I were into boating and fishing and hunting and golf and other really cool activities that people do, any one of those would cost a whole lot more than what I will ever spend on podcasting. So, no, I don't make money on it. I spend money on it, and it's worth every penny to me. Another question is, what got you interested in podcasting? Well, I can clearly remember in my early 20s when I was taking a break from college from the University of Kentucky, and I was managing a pipe and tobacco and gift shop at Fayette Mall. And many times I would be standing behind the counter weighing out tobacco on these antique balance scales for a customer, and sometimes there'd be more than one, two or three, and we'd be having a conversation, and I would be thinking, oh my goodness, I wish I had a talk radio show. Of course, in the early 70s, we did not have podcasting. Podcasting didn't come out till about 2004, I think it was. I had my first podcast in 2007, but I thought at that time in the early 70s, I wish that I could have an interview show on the radio and be able to share these interesting conversations with other people, but that was not possible. And then when I heard about podcasting somewhere around 2006 and started looking into it and finding out that that was a way that you did not have to have a syndicated radio show, but you could have your own show with podcasting, it was just incredible to me. So that's what got me interested in it, was just really good conversations with people in my college days. Another question is, do you edit your own podcasts? Yes, I do. I edit every episode myself. I am a one-man band for sure. The only thing that I have hired out, paid someone to do for me, was to design the show art or logo that is required. It has specifications that are very specific specifications as far as size and so on. And I am not a graphic designer by any means. I've played with Canva, but it's not what I enjoy doing. So I hired Joanna Sharrow from Savvy Chic Design, and I will have a link to Joanna's website in the show notes to the podcast. But she was a pleasure to work with and did the design for the show art logo that I use. But I do my own editing using a program called it's called a DAW, a digital audio workstation, DAW, called Hindenburg Pro, and I love Hindenburg Pro, and I highly recommend it. I'll have a link in the show notes to Hindenburg also. Now, if I did not edit my own podcast, then I would hire Jennifer Longworth here in Lexington, who has a media company, a podcast editing company, and more, called Bourbon Barrel Podcasting. She can do everything from just consult with you about how to get your podcast up and running to doing the detailed editing for it, even uploading it to your podcast host and everything. So Jennifer Longworth, Bourbon Barrel Podcasting, and I will have a link in my show notes to her contact information. Another question, what microphone do you use? Well, as I mentioned, my basement here, studio, looks like a radio station, people have told me. So I have 4 microphones on boom arms that are connected to individual tables that can be configured differently around the room depending on whether I have just one guest or whether I have 2 or 3. And all 4 of my mics are ATR 2100 dynamic mics. That's Audio-Technica 2100 dynamic mics. And when I'm doing an interview show, my microphones are plugged with XLR cables into my Zoom H6 digital recorder. Now, has nothing to do with the Zoom that you use to have conversations over your computer with people. This is a professional digital recorder, and my XLR cables come out of my ATR 2100s directly into the Zoom H6. I can have 4 mics on 4 tracks plugged into that. But when I'm doing a solo show, as I'm doing right now, then my ATR 2100 mic is plugged into the Focusrite Scarlett Solo, which is an audio interface, and then it comes out of the Focusrite Solo box with a USB cable directly into my computer, directly into my DAW, which is Hindenburg. Wow, we're coming up on 20 minutes already, and I've only covered about 9 questions here. I've got many more. And it's occurred to me that a lot of these questions, to really give a good answer, because I'm not taking a deep dive on any of these are all like the 10,000 foot view, but I could go into more depth if I used some video so that I could show some things rather than just explain them. So I'm thinking that maybe in 2023 or 2024, I'll put together some type of a video package that would, a course type package that would explain some of these things for those of you who are interested in knowing a little bit more about what I do and how I do it and why I do it and so on. And we'll see how that plays out as we go into the year later. Well, I did it. I did a solo unscripted show. I really do hope that it didn't turn into too much of a ramble cast, but I appreciate my listeners. I look forward to the people that I am lining up to interview in 2023 and make it a great new year. Thanks for listening.